The train wheezed to a halt at Karlovy Vary station on a gray October morning in 1873, and our Wilhelm Brenner stepped onto the platform with the careful precision of a man who had learned never to trust uncertain ground. You see, dear listener, Wilhelm carried himself with the particular dignity of those who work with their hands, yet think with their minds. A mining engineer turned geologist, 38 years of age, with premature silver threading through his brown hair and a slight favoring of his left leg from an old cave-in near Dresden. The spa town spread before him like a theater set, all cream-colored facades and gilt lettering, where the wealthy came to take the waters and cure their various ailments, real or imagined. Wilhelm's worn leather satchel and practical wool coat marked him immediately as neither tourist nor patient, but something in between, that peculiar species of professional man hired to serve, but never quite to belong. Herr Brenner? The voice belonged to a young coachman in the emerald and gold livery of the von Reichenbach family. Wilhelm nodded, thinking how his sister Martha would laugh to see him collected by such finery. Her last letter weighed in his coat pocket. Little Franz needed books for his mining school examinations. The roof leaked again, and could Wilhelm possibly send a bit extra this month? The coach climbed steadily away from the town's manicured center, past the hotels where Russian princes took their morning constitutional, past the bathhouses where copper pipes carried the famous hot springs to marble pools. Wilhelm observed how quickly the gilded facades gave way to simpler buildings, then to workers' quarters, where laundry hung between narrow windows, and finally to countryside proper. This was the eternal geography of resort towns, he mused. Luxury required an invisible army to maintain its illusions. The von Reichenbach estate appeared through autumn mist, like something from a Gothic novel, which Wilhelm supposed was rather the point. These old, noble families, they understood the power of atmosphere. The main house rose in Baroque splendor, all curves and angels, while behind it spread gardens that must have employed a dozen men to maintain. Wilhelm's practical eye noted the limestone foundation, the slate roof recently repaired in patches, the way the building sat upon a natural rise that would have excellent drainage. Leopold von Reichenbach received him in the library, a room designed to intimidate, with its floor-to-ceiling books and portraits of stern ancestors. The heir was 34, Wilhelm had been told, though he carried himself with the studied casualness of a younger man. His handshake was firm but brief, his smile practiced. Herr Brenner, excellent. Father is eager to develop a proper spa on our grounds. These mineral springs are all the rage, you understand. Leopold's German carried a slight Viennese accent, mocking his education. We have natural springs already, but we need an expert to locate the best sources, analyze the mineral content, make it all properly scientific. Wilhelm nodded, noting how Leopold's eyes didn't quite meet his when he said scientific. Interesting. In his experience, men who hired experts either trusted them completely or saw them as necessary nuisances. Leopold, it seemed, fell into the latter category. The young count led him through the estate, pointing out various features with the air of a man showing off possessions rather than sharing information. Here, the formal gardens. There, the succession of fish ponds. Beyond, the parkland with its carefully maintained wilderness. Wilhelm mentally mapped the topography, noting how water moved through this landscape, where the land dipped and rose, where different rock strata might meet. And this, Leopold said, gesturing toward a grove of ancient oaks, is our famous grotto. Quite the family curiosity. They descended worn stone steps into a natural cave formation, enhanced by human hands perhaps a century ago. The walls wept with moisture, and the air held that particular chill of underground spaces. Wilhelm's professional interest quickened. The limestone here showed interesting formations, and he detected the faint mineral scent that might indeed indicate therapeutic waters. "There's a legend about this place," Leopold said, his tone suggesting amusement at provincial superstitions. "That large stone there, shaped rather like a heart, don't you think? Family lore says it glows when the head of the house is dying. Peasant nonsense, of course, but the servants believe it absolutely." Wilhelm approached the stone, his fingers automatically testing its surface, feeling the crystalline structure beneath. His mind was already cataloging some form of fluorite, perhaps, mixed with other minerals. The shape was indeed remarkably heart-like, a quirk of nature that human imagination had invested with meaning. That evening, installed in a comfortable but modest room in the estate's guest wing, Wilhelm unpacked his few belongings and tools. Through his window, he could see the lights of Karlovy Vary twinkling in the valley below, that separate world of luxury and ease. He thought of Martha and her children in their cramped quarters in Saxony, of his nephew Franz, bent over his studies by candlelight, ambitious for a better life through education. The maid who brought his supper introduced herself as Anna, a woman of perhaps 28 years, with intelligent eyes and work-worn hands like his own. "You're here about the waters, sir?" "Indeed. To make your master rich, apparently." He allowed himself a small smile. She returned it briefly. "The Count, the old Count, that is, he's not well. Hasn't left his room in weeks. The young master handles everything now." A pause, weighted with servant's knowledge. "Will you need anything else, sir?" Wilhelm shook his head, but filed the information away. In his experience, servants always knew the real story of any household, though getting them to share it required patience and trust. He would need both in the weeks ahead. That night, as autumn rain began to tap against his window, Wilhelm studied his preliminary maps of the estate, marking possible sites for investigation. Tomorrow he would begin his real work, not just finding water, but understanding the land itself, reading its stories written in stone and soil. It was what he did best, this patient unraveling of the Earth's secrets. Human secrets, he had learned, often proved far more complicated. 3 weeks into his survey, Wilhelm had established a comfortable routine. Rise before dawn, break his fast with the servants in the kitchen, where the coffee was stronger and the information flowed more freely than in the formal dining room, then out into the October morning with his instruments and notebooks. The estate revealed itself to him layer by layer, like sedimentary rock telling the story of ages past. It was on such a morning, the 28th of October to be precise, that everything changed. Wilhelm had been examining a promising depression near the eastern boundary when Anna came hurrying across the frosted grass, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. "Herr Brenner, you're wanted at the house. It's urgent." The main hall buzzed with that particular tension that comes when wealthy households face the unexpected. Dr. Emil Hartmann stood in heated discussion with Leopold while several servants huddled near the staircase, whispering. The Countess Maria von Reichenbach sat in a high-backed chair, her rosary beads clicking through her fingers with mechanical precision. "Ah, Brenner." Leopold's face was flushed. Whether from anger or worry, Wilhelm couldn't tell. "We have a situation. Father Benedict insists you should see this, though I fail to understand what a geologist has to do with my father's medical condition." The old priest stood near the door, his weathered face grave. Father Benedict had been with the family for 40 years, Wilhelm had learned, baptizing, marrying, and burying generations of von Reichenbachs. "The stone, Herr Brenner. You must see the stone." They formed an unlikely procession through the morning mist, the heir, the priest, the doctor, and the geologist. The grotto felt colder than Wilhelm remembered, and damp seemed to press against them from all sides. But it wasn't the temperature that made the small group fall silent. There, in the dim light filtering through the entrance, the heart-shaped stone emitted a faint but unmistakable luminescence, a ghostly blue-green glow that seemed to pulse gently, as if it truly were a living heart. "It began last night," Father Benedict said softly, "just as the Count took his turn for the worse. The servants saw it when they came to fetch water from the spring, just as the legend foretold." Dr. Hartmann, a man of 54 years with the bearing of one who had studied in Vienna's finest medical schools, cleared his throat. "The Count's condition has indeed deteriorated. His breathing is labored, and he hasn't taken food in 2 days. But surely this is coincidence, some natural phenomenon." His voice trailed off as they all stared at the glowing stone. Wilhelm approached slowly, his scientific mind racing, while his skin prickled with an atavistic unease. The glow was real, no doubt about that. But ghosts and curses? No, there would be an explanation. There always was. "How old is this legend exactly?" Wilhelm asked, pulling out his notebook. Father Benedict straightened. "The stone has been here since at least 1722, when Count Johann von Reichenbach built the grotto. It's said he found the stone while hunting and recognized its unusual properties. The first recorded glowing was in 1758, the night before Count Johann's death. Then again in 1791, before his son passed. And 1834, before my grandfather died," Leopold finished, his skepticism seemingly shaken. "But it's been almost 40 years since then. Why now?" Wilhelm knelt beside the stone, careful not to touch it yet. The glow seemed strongest near the base, where moisture had accumulated. "Tell me, has anything changed recently? The water flow, perhaps? Any construction work?" "Nothing," Leopold said quickly. Too quickly, Wilhelm thought. "May I?" Wilhelm gestured toward the stone. At Leopold's nod, he ran his fingers along its surface. The stone felt cool, damp, entirely ordinary except for that ethereal light. His fingertips came away slightly moist, and he smelled them carefully. Mineral-rich water, certainly, but something else. Something sharp and chemical beneath the earthiness. "I'll need to conduct some tests," Wilhelm said, standing. "With your permission, I'd like to take a small sample." "You cannot," Father Benedict protested. "The stone is sacred to this family." "Let him," Leopold interrupted, surprising everyone. "If Herr Brenner can provide a scientific explanation, all the better. We are living in 1873, not the Middle Ages." But his hands trembled slightly as he spoke, Wilhelm noticed. Even educated men found it hard to shake the shadows of childhood superstitions. That afternoon, Wilhelm carefully chipped a few fragments from the stone's base, where the formation was already naturally fractured. The servants watched from a respectful distance, crossing themselves. Anna brought him his tools, and as she handed them over, she whispered, "My grandmother saw it glow in 34. Said it was like watching the earth itself weep light." Back in his room, Wilhelm examined the fragments under his hand lens. Definitely fluorite, as he'd suspected, with its distinctive cubic crystal structure. But fluorite didn't spontaneously glow. It needed activation, heat, or certain chemicals, or ultraviolet light, though that was unlikely in a dark grotto. Unless... He performed a simple test, placing the fragment in darkness and exposing it to various stimuli. Nothing produced the blue-green glow he'd witnessed. Whatever was causing the phenomenon in the grotto required conditions he couldn't replicate in his room. That evening, as Wilhelm dined alone, Leopold had excused himself to attend to his father. He found himself thinking about the nature of belief. The servants were absolutely convinced the stone's glow predicted death. Would that belief itself affect the Count's condition? He'd heard of such things, men dying because they believed they were cursed. A soft knock interrupted his musings. Dr. Hartmann entered, looking exhausted. "Herr Brenner, might I speak freely?" Wilhelm gestured to a chair. The doctor sat heavily, accepting the brandy Wilhelm offered. "I've been the family physician for 15 years, Hartmann began. "The Count's illness is real. Chronic lung disease, exacerbated by years of pipe smoking and our damp climate. But this business with the stone, it's affecting everyone. The Countess refuses to leave the chapel. Leopold paces the halls at night, and the servants whisper of curses. Even I find myself." He paused, taking a sip. "Do you believe in such things?" "I believe in what I can measure and test," Wilhelm replied carefully. "But I also believe that there are more things in heaven and earth than we yet understand. The stone glows, that's a fact. Why it glows, and why now, those are questions science can answer." Hartmann nodded slowly. "Find those answers quickly, Herr Brenner. I fear the psychological effect on the household may prove as damaging as any curse." Later that night, unable to sleep, Wilhelm returned to the grotto alone. The stone still glowed in the darkness, that steady, impossible light. He sat on a damp boulder, watching and thinking. Somewhere above him, Count von Reichenbach struggled for breath. Throughout the house, people waited and worried, and here, in this cave, a piece of mineral did something it shouldn't be able to do. Wilhelm thought of his nephew, Franz, so eager to understand the physical world through science. What would the boy make of this? But then, Wilhelm reflected, perhaps that was the wrong question. The better question was, who would benefit from making a stone glow at precisely this moment? In his experience, when the impossible happened, it was usually because someone very possible had arranged it. The thought chilled him more than the October air. November arrived with frost on the windows, and Wilhelm deep in his systematic study of the estate's geology. Each morning, he divided his attention between his official task, locating mineral springs, and his unofficial obsession with the glowing stone. The two pursuits, he was beginning to realize, might not be as separate as they first appeared. The limestone beneath the von Reichenbach estate told a story millions of years in the making. Ancient seas had deposited layer upon layer of sediment here, compressed by time into the pale rock through which water now percolated, gathering minerals, creating the springs that made Karlovy Vary famous. Wilhelm mapped these formations with the patience of a man reading a very old, very important book. On the 7th of November, a breakthrough on both fronts. Wilhelm had been testing water samples from various points across the estate when his chemical analysis revealed a particularly promising source near the old mill pond. The mineral content was exceptional, high in sodium, potassium, and trace elements that would rival the famous Sprudel spring in town. Leopold would be pleased. This could indeed become a profitable spa. "You look like a man who's found gold," Anna said, bringing his afternoon coffee to the makeshift laboratory he'd established in an unused pantry. She'd taken to visiting him during her brief breaks, drawn perhaps by his quiet manner and the fact that he actually explained his work rather than ordering her about. Better than gold, perhaps. "Water that wealthy people will pay to bathe in." He showed her the precipitation in his test tubes, the various colors indicating different minerals. "See? This blue means copper traces. The white is calcium." She studied the tubes with genuine interest. "My father was a glassblower," she said suddenly, before his lungs gave out. "He understood chemicals too in his way. Said you had to know what would make the glass blue or green or clear as water." Wilhelm looked at her more carefully. Behind the servant's careful deference lay a sharp intelligence, held in check by circumstance. "You understand more than you let on." "Understanding and speaking are different things, Herr Brenner. A maid who speaks too much finds herself without a position." She adjusted her cap, preparing to leave, then paused. "The young master was in the grotto again last night. 3rd time this week." After she left, Wilhelm pondered this information while examining his latest samples from the grotto itself. The fluorite there was indeed remarkable. Some of the finest specimens he'd seen outside of a museum. Under his magnifying lens, the crystals revealed their perfect cubic structure. Purple and green bands showing where different minerals had been incorporated during formation. But it was the water seepage that truly intrigued him. The grotto's walls wept constantly, water working its way through microscopic channels in the limestone. He'd traced some of these channels upward, finding they seemed to originate from somewhere on the hill above. Natural enough, except Wilhelm consulted his detailed topographical maps. The hill above the grotto should be shedding water in several directions, not concentrating it toward this one spot, unless there was some kind of collection point up there, a pool or reservoir that focused the flow. He made a note to investigate, though the autumn rains were making the hillside treacherous. That evening brought an unexpected invitation to dine with the family. Wilhelm found himself seated at a table that could have accommodated 20, with Leopold at the head, the Countess Maria to his right, and Dr. Hartmann to his left. The Count himself remained confined to his chambers, his breathing, Hartmann quietly informed them, growing more labored by the day. "My husband wishes to know about your progress," the Countess said, her German formal and precise. She was 58, Wilhelm had learned, but appeared older, worn down by worry and perpetual disapproval. "Both with the springs and with the other matter." "I have located an excellent mineral source by the mill pond," Wilhelm reported. "The water quality surpasses many established spa sources. As for the stone, I continue my investigations." "Father Benedict believes we should accept God's will," the Countess said, her fingers finding her ever-present rosary. "But Leopold insists on these modern investigations." "Science and faith need not be enemies, Mother," Leopold said, though his tone suggested they'd had this argument before. "If God created the natural world, surely understanding it better brings us closer to Him." It was a diplomatic answer, Wilhelm thought, watching Leopold cut his meat with precise movements. The young heir had been educated by Jesuits in Vienna, he'd learned, where such reconciliations between faith and reason were much debated. But there was something in Leopold's manner when he spoke of the glowing stone that suggested more than academic interest. "Tell me, Herr Brenner," Leopold continued, "in your experience, can minerals be made to phosphoresce artificially?" The question was too casual, too specific. Wilhelm chose his words carefully. "There are several ways. Exposure to certain lights, heating, chemical reactions. The ancient Chinese knew how to make paints that glowed in the dark."
More recently, scientists have discovered that various substances can trigger luminescence in susceptible minerals. "Fascinating," Leopold murmured, though his expression suggested he already knew this. Dr. Hartmann changed the subject to the latest medical theories from Vienna, but Wilhelm noticed Leopold's attention wandering, his gaze repeatedly drawn to the dark windows facing the grotto's direction. Later, in his room, Wilhelm spread out his growing collection of notes and samples. He'd written to his colleague Jakob Stein in town, a Jewish chemist who ran a small laboratory serving the spa industry. Jakob had agreed to perform more sophisticated tests than Wilhelm's field equipment allowed, though discretion was required. Leopold had made it clear that news of the glowing stone was not to spread beyond the estate. A pattern was emerging from his investigations, though he couldn't quite see its full shape yet. The water in the grotto had unusual properties. The fluorite responded to chemical stimulation. Leopold showed suspicious interest in artificial phosphorescence. And through it all, Count von Reichenbach grew weaker, while his air grew more agitated. Wilhelm pulled out a sheet of paper to write to Martha. Her latest letter had been full of worry. Franz had passed his examinations, but the fees for advanced schooling were beyond their means. Wilhelm calculated his payment from the von Reichenbachs, subtracting his modest expenses. If he was careful, lived simply, he could send most of it home. "My dear sister," he wrote, "the work here progresses well. The nobility have peculiar problems, but they pay promptly for solutions. Tell Franz to accept the school position. I will manage the fees." He paused, thinking of Anna's father, the glassblower whose lungs gave out. Of all the servants, watching the stone with fearful fascination. Of the Countess, clicking through her rosary beads, and Leopold, pacing the halls at night. Everyone here was trapped in their own way. By class, by tradition, by secrets they couldn't or wouldn't speak. Wilhelm had always prided himself on being a man of science, dealing in facts and measurements. But here in this Baroque estate, surrounded by autumn mists and ancient legends, he was learning that human chemistry was far more volatile than any mineral reaction. The stone glowed, that was a fact, but the why of it, that was becoming a question not just of science, but of human nature at its most calculating. Outside his window, barely visible in the darkness, he could make out the grove that sheltered the grotto. Was the stone glowing still? Was Leopold there, conducting his own investigations? Wilhelm found himself thinking of the Chinese phosphorescent paints, of how knowledge could be used to create wonder or fear. Tomorrow, he decided, weather permitting, he would climb the hill above the grotto. Whatever fed those seeping walls might hold the key to this mystery. The package from Jacob Stein arrived on the 15th of November, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with wax. delivered by a discreet messenger who vanished before Wilhelm could offer a gratuity. Inside, along with his analyzed samples, Jacob had included a note written in his precise hand. "Most intriguing specimens. We should discuss in person. Thursday afternoon, perhaps? The coffee house behind the synagogue serves excellent strudel and asks few questions." Wilhelm tucked the note away, studying the analysis results with growing excitement and unease. The fluorite samples showed exactly what he'd expected: calcium fluoride with trace elements of rare earth metals that gave it its distinctive purple-green coloration. But the water residue from the grotto walls told a different story. Along with the expected minerals, Jacob had detected traces of substances that had no business being in natural spring water. Zinc sulfide and strontium aluminate, both capable of phosphorescent reactions when properly activated. Thursday came gray and drizzling, perfect weather for discreet meetings. Wilhelm told Leopold he needed supplies from town, which was true enough. He did stop at the chemical supplier before making his way to the narrow streets of the Jewish quarter. The coffee house was small, warm, and filled with the scent of cinnamon and coffee. Jacob Stein sat in a corner booth, a man of 45 with prematurely white hair and careful, intelligent eyes behind wire spectacles. "Herr Brenner," Jacob rose, shaking hands warmly. They'd corresponded for years, but met rarely. "Your samples have given me several sleepless nights." They ordered coffee and strudel, waiting until the proprietor retreated before speaking seriously. Jacob produced a small vial from his pocket containing a pale powder. "This is what I isolated from your water residue. Watch." He sprinkled a few grains onto a saucer, then added a drop of mild acid from another vial. The powder glowed with a familiar blue-green light, faint but unmistakable. Zinc sulfide mixed with copper activator. Someone has been very clever. Wilhelm stared at the glowing powder, his suspicions crystallizing. This couldn't occur naturally? Never. This is laboratory chemistry, Herr Brenner. Someone with knowledge and access to specific materials is adding these compounds to water that then flows through your grotto. The fluorite acts as a substrate, concentrating the phosphorescent materials. In darkness, the effect would be quite dramatic. How long would such a glow last? Hours, depending on the concentration. It would fade gradually, giving the impression of a living light. Jacob leaned back, his expression troubled. "I must ask, what is this about?" "These materials are cheap, and the knowledge to use them isn't common." Wilhelm chose his words carefully. Jacob lived in a precarious position, tolerated for his expertise, but never fully accepted. "A geological anomaly at the estate I'm surveying. The family prefers discretion." Jacob nodded, understanding more than was said. "Be careful, my friend. In my experience, when science is used to create false miracles, someone usually profits, and someone else usually suffers." Returning to the estate as evening fell, Wilhelm found the household in subdued chaos. The Count had taken a turn for the worse, Dr. Hartmann informed him, and the family had gathered for what might be final vigils. Wilhelm climbed to his room, mind racing with the implications of Jacob's findings. Leopold had studied in Vienna, where chemistry was taught as rigorously as theology. He had access to the estate, knowledge of the grotto's properties, and, most significantly, motive. An inheritance that would solve whatever financial pressures drove him to pace the halls at night. But knowing and proving were different things. And even if Wilhelm could prove it, what then? Accuse the heir of what exactly? Making a stone glow? There was no law against that, even if the timing was suspiciously convenient. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Anna entered with his evening tray, but her usual composure was shaken. "The stone, Herr Brenner. It's glowing brighter than ever. The servants are terrified. Cook has given notice, says she won't stay in a cursed house." Wilhelm made a decision. "Anna, do you trust me?" She studied his face for a long moment. "Yes." "The stone glows because someone wants it to glow. It's not supernatural, it's chemistry. But I need to understand more before I can act. Will you help me?" Her eyes widened, but she nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "Information. When does Leopold visit the grotto? Does he carry anything with him? Has he received any chemical supplies recently? I can ask Marie. She cleans his rooms. But Herr Brenner, if the young master learns I've been spying—" "You won't be spying, just observing. There's a difference." He pulled out his wallet, extracting several bills. "For your trouble. And if you need to leave suddenly, this will help." She looked at the money with a mixture of need and pride. "My position here is all I have." "I know. That's why I'm being careful. But Anna, if what I suspect is true, there may soon be no position anyway. When the Count dies and Leopold inherits, things will change." She took the money slowly, tucking it into her apron. Marie mentioned something odd. The young master had several bottles delivered last month from Vienna. Glass bottles, carefully packed. He told her they were medicines for his father, but he never gave them to Dr.
Hartman. After she left, Wilhelm sat at his small desk, mapping out what he knew. The chemicals Jacob identified could be purchased from scientific suppliers, but they'd require knowledge to use effectively. The delivery system through the water was clever. It would ensure even distribution across the fluorite surface, creating the illusion of the stone itself glowing, rather than being coated with phosphorescent material. But there had to be a reservoir or mixing point somewhere above the grotto, a place where Leopold could add his chemicals to the water flow. Tomorrow, Wilhelm decided, regardless of weather, he would find it. He thought of the Count, struggling for breath in his chambers, while below, a stone glowed with false prophecy. The old man was dying, that was true. Dr. Hartman had made that clear. But the psychological effect of the curse on the household, the way it demoralized the family and servants alike, that was accelerating everything. The Countess had aged years in weeks, convinced God was calling her husband home. The servants were abandoning their posts, and Leopold waited, playing the concerned son, while orchestrating a light show that turned natural death into supernatural inevitability. Wilhelm pulled out paper to write to Martha, but found himself unable to form the cheerful words she needed to hear. How could he explain that he was trapped between scientific truth and social powerlessness? That he knew a crime of sorts was being committed, but couldn't quite name it or stop it. Instead, he sketched the fluorite crystal structure, adding notes about phosphorescent reactions. Franz would enjoy the chemistry lesson, even if he couldn't know its dark application. Science, Wilhelm reflected, was neither good nor evil in itself. It was a tool, and like any tool, its morality lay in how it was wielded. Through his window, he could see lights moving through the gardens, servants with lanterns, probably gathering for prayers in the chapel. Their faith was being used against them, turned into a weapon of fear and resignation.
And somewhere in the darkness, Leopold was probably adding another dose of chemicals to his hidden reservoir, ensuring the stone would glow through another night, another step closer to his inheritance. The last days of November brought the kind of persistent rain that turned paths to mud and made climbing treacherous hillsides an act of considered determination. Wilhelm had waited 3 days for better weather before accepting that waiting was itself becoming suspicious. Leopold had taken to watching him with poorly concealed interest, inquiring daily about his progress with the mineral springs, always steering conversation toward technical matters of water flow and geological formations.
On the morning of November 28th, Wilhelm announced he would be surveying the eastern boundary, the opposite direction from the Grotto Hill. He made a show of loading his equipment, setting off visibly eastward, then doubled back through the forest once out of sight from the house. The rain had lessened to a fine mist that clung to everything, muffling sounds and reducing visibility to 20 yards. The hill above the grotto rose steeply, covered in beech and oak, whose fallen leaves made a treacherous carpet over the limestone outcroppings. Wilhelm climbed methodically, his bad leg protesting, following the logic of water. Where would someone place a reservoir to feed the grotto below? It would need to be hidden but accessible, natural-looking but artificial in function. He found it after 2 hours of searching, a depression in the limestone that had been artificially deepened and lined with clay to hold water. Someone had been clever, using an existing formation and modifying it just enough to serve their purpose. The pool was perhaps 6 feet across and 3 feet deep, fed by natural runoff, but with a carefully concealed pipe at its base leading downward toward the grotto. Around the pool's edge, Wilhelm found what he'd expected: glass fragments from broken bottles, a wooden stirring rod stained with chemical residue, and most tellingly, fresh boot prints in the mud. Expensive boots with a distinctive maker's mark in the heel, the same boots Leopold had worn at dinner 3 nights ago. Wilhelm took samples of the water and sediment, photographed the scene with his small camera, then carefully obscured his own tracks. As he descended through the dripping forest, his mind worked through the implications. The setup was ingenious. Chemicals added to this pool would be diluted and carried naturally down to the grotto, where they would accumulate on the fluorite surface. The limestone's natural filtering would remove most traces by the time the water emerged elsewhere on the estate, making detection unlikely unless one knew exactly where to look. Back at the house, he found Anna waiting anxiously in his makeshift laboratory. "Marie found something," she said without preamble, producing a crumpled receipt from her apron. "It fell behind the young master's bureau. From a chemical supply house in Vienna." Wilhelm smoothed the paper, reading the itemized list: zinc sulfide, copper sulfate, strontium aluminate, various acids and binding agents. Everything needed to create phosphorescent compounds, dated 6 weeks ago, well before the Count's condition had worsened, before the stone had begun to glow. "This is premeditation," Wilhelm said quietly. "He planned this." "There's more," Anna said, her voice dropping. "Dr. Hartmann wants to speak with you. Privately."
He's in the old library.
The old library occupied a wing of the house rarely used, its books gathering dust behind glass doors. Dr. Hartmann stood by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. He looked older than his 54 years, worn down by weeks of death watch. "The Count is asking for you," he said without turning. "He's lucid today."
perhaps for the last time. But first, I must know, what have you discovered about the stone? Wilhelm weighed his options, then decided on truth. He explained the phosphorescent chemicals, the hidden reservoir, the evidence pointing to Leopold. Hartmann listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer. "I suspected something," the doctor said finally. "Leopold has been too interested in his father's condition, asking detailed medical questions, particularly about timing. And there was an incident. A month ago, he asked me about certain compounds, claiming academic interest.
The same compounds would accelerate lung deterioration if administered carefully.
You think he's poisoning his father?
No, nothing so crude. The Count's disease is real and terminal. But stress, fear, the psychological burden of this curse, these things hasten death in weakened patients. Leopold isn't killing his father. He's ensuring he dies sooner rather than later." Hartmann turned from the window. "The question is, what do we do about it?" Before Wilhelm could answer, a bell rang somewhere in the house, the signal that the Count wished to receive visitors. They climbed the stairs together, entering a bedroom that smelled of medicine and impending death. Count Franz von Reichenbach lay propped against pillows, his breathing labored, but his eyes alert. "Herr Brenner," the Count whispered, gesturing weakly for Wilhelm to approach. "My son thinks me too ill to understand, but dying men often see clearly." "The stone glows, yes?" "Yes, Your Excellency, but not by God's hand." It wasn't a question. The Count's eyes, still sharp despite his body's weakness, studied Wilhelm's face. "I know my son, ambitious, clever, but impatient. Always impatient." Wilhelm said nothing, but his expression must have confirmed the Count's suspicions. "Tell me about the real mineral springs you found. The legitimate ones." For 10 minutes, Wilhelm described the excellent source near the mill pond, its mineral content, its commercial potential. The Count listened intently, occasionally nodding. "Good. Draw up the full survey, all documentation. Have it witnessed and notarized in town. The development rights will be established before I die, put in trust for my wife's maintenance. Leopold will inherit the estate. But not everything." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Even dying men can make plans." As they left the sick room, Dr. Hartmann touched Wilhelm's arm. "He knows what his son is doing, and he's choosing his own response. Sometimes, Herr Brenner, justice comes in unexpected forms." That evening, Wilhelm sat in his room, organizing his legitimate survey of the mineral springs. Through his window, he could see lantern light near the grotto, servants going to see if the stone still glowed, or Leopold adding more chemicals to his reservoir. He thought of the Count, using his last strength to protect his wife's future, accepting his fate while subtly thwarting his son's greed. Anna brought his dinner, along with news that Cook had withdrawn her notice. The Countess promised extra wages for those who stay through the end. "And will you stay?" She nodded slowly. "Where would I go? At least here I understand the devils I serve." It was, Wilhelm reflected, as honest an assessment of service as he'd ever heard. He thought of his own position, technically serving Leopold, actually serving truth, ultimately serving his own family's needs. Everyone here was navigating between loyalty and survival, truth and necessity. The rain had stopped, and through the gathering darkness a faint blue-green glow was visible from the direction of the grotto. The false prophecy continued its work, breaking down resistance, creating resignation.
But now several people knew the truth, even if they chose not to act on it directly. Sometimes, Wilhelm thought, knowing was enough. Sometimes, the best response to deception wasn't exposure, but quiet circumvention. He pulled out paper to finally write to Martha. "The work here continues," he began. "I have made discoveries both profitable and troubling. The wealthy, I'm learning, are prisoners of their own elaborate cages, though the bars are made of gold rather than iron." December brought snow to the Bohemian hills, transforming the von Reichenbach estate into something from a winter fairy tale. But fairy tales, Wilhelm had learned, often contained more darkness than their pretty surfaces suggested. The Count lingered on, defying Dr. Hartmann's predictions, while the stone continued its nightly performance, glowing like a beacon of doom in the frozen grotto. On the morning of December 8th, Wilhelm made a disturbing discovery. He'd gone to check his monitoring equipment near the mill pond when he noticed footprints in the fresh snow leading to his marker stakes. Someone had been examining his work, and, judging by the boot prints, those expensive Viennese boots again, Leopold was taking a keen interest in the legitimate mineral springs. That afternoon, Leopold summoned him to the study. The heir sat behind his father's desk, already assuming the master's position, though the Count still drew breath 2 floors above. "Your survey is nearly complete, I understand," Leopold said, gesturing for Wilhelm to sit. "The notary in town mentioned you'd been in to certify documents." So Leopold had spies in town. Wilhelm kept his expression neutral. "The Count requested official documentation of the mineral springs for future development." "Future?" Leopold smiled thinly. "Yes, we must all think of the future. Tell me, Herr Brenner, what do you make of our glowing stone? You've had weeks to study it." The question hung between them like a challenge. Wilhelm chose his words carefully. "It's a remarkable geological formation, fluorite of exceptional quality. But the glowing? Natural phosphorescence is well documented in certain minerals under specific conditions." Leopold leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Specific conditions, yes. You know, Herr Brenner, I've been reading about such phenomena. Fascinating how nature can be encouraged to display her wonders, with the right knowledge, of course." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Leopold was telling him, "I know that you know, and you will say nothing." "I've also been reviewing your contract," Leopold continued. "You've been remarkably efficient. I think we can conclude your services earlier than expected. Shall we say by year's end? With a substantial bonus for your discretion, naturally." "That's generous, but my survey is essentially complete. The springs near the mill pond will make an excellent spa. Father will be pleased." He paused deliberately, while he's still able to be pleased by such things. Wilhelm understood. He was being bought off and warned off simultaneously. Accept the money, leave quietly, or face consequences that a man in Leopold's position could easily arrange. That evening, Wilhelm found Anna waiting in his laboratory, her face pale with worry. "There's been an accident," she said quickly. "Marie fell down the servants' stairs this afternoon. She's alive, but her arm is broken and she's terrified. She swears someone pushed her, but she didn't see who." Marie, who had found the receipt, who cleaned Leopold's rooms. Wilhelm felt a chill that had nothing to do with December weather. "She won't be able to work for weeks," Anna continued. The young master has already arranged for her dismissal with a small pension. Very generous, everyone says. Another warning then. Leopold was systematically removing witnesses, using both carrot and stick. Wilhelm thought of his sister and nephew, dependent on his income. He thought of Anna, vulnerable in her servant's position. He thought of the Count, dying by degrees while his son orchestrated fear throughout the household. Anna, you must be very careful now. Don't ask any more questions. Don't watch Leopold. Don't give him any reason to notice you. But the Count knows what's happening. He's made his own arrangements. Wilhelm pulled out his wallet, extracting most of his remaining funds. Take this. Hide it somewhere safe. If anything happens, if you need to leave suddenly, use it. She looked at the money with wide eyes. This is too much. It's necessary. Please. As she tucked the money away, she said quietly, My grandmother was right about one thing. She said the stone's glow was like watching the earth weep light. She just didn't know it was weeping for the living, not the dead. After she left, Wilhelm sat in the gathering darkness, weighing his options. He could expose Leopold publicly, but who would believe a hired geologist against a nobleman? He could go to the authorities, but what crime had actually been committed? Making a stone glow wasn't illegal. The Count was dying of natural causes, hastened perhaps by stress, but not by poison. A knock interrupted his brooding. Dr. Hartmann entered, closing the door carefully behind him. I've just come from the Count, the doctor said. He wants to see you tomorrow morning, early, before Leopold wakes. He has instructions. His son grows suspicious. His son grows desperate. I've learned Leopold has substantial gambling debts in Vienna. The creditors are becoming insistent. He needs his inheritance soon, or scandal will ensue. Hartmann sat heavily. The Count knows all of this. He's known for months. That's why he hired you, not just for the springs, but to document them legally, to protect assets from Leopold's creditors. Wilhelm felt pieces clicking into place. I've been a pawn in a father-son chess match. We all have. But perhaps pawns who understand the game can choose their moves more wisely. Hartmann stood to leave, then paused. The Count is a hard man, Herr Brenner, but not unjust. He'll ensure you're compensated for the danger you've faced. As for Leopold, desperate men make mistakes. Watch yourself. That night, unable to sleep, Wilhelm stood at his window watching snow fall silently across the estate. Somewhere out there, the stone glowed in its grotto, false prophet of a death everyone expected. Leopold probably stood at his own window, calculating how many more days his father might last, how many more doses of chemicals he'd need to maintain his supernatural charade. But the real tragedy, Wilhelm thought, wasn't the deception itself. It was how readily everyone had accepted it, how quickly fear had overtaken reason. The servants crossed themselves and whispered prayers instead of asking questions. The Countess retreated into religious fatalism instead of fighting for her husband's peace of mind. Even educated men like Hartmann had initially hesitated, caught between scientific training and ancestral superstition. Only the Count himself had seen through it immediately, too wise or too cynical to believe in curses. And he'd chosen to use his son's deception against him, legally maneuvering to protect what he could while letting Leopold think his plan succeeded. Wilhelm thought of the zinc sulfide and copper sulfate creating their false glow,
of how simple chemistry had become an instrument of psychological torture. Science without conscience, he reflected, was perhaps the real curse of their modern age. Men like Leopold learned enough to manipulate nature, but not enough to respect it, gained power without wisdom, knowledge without understanding. Tomorrow he would receive the Count's final instructions. Soon after, he would leave this place, returning to his simpler world of honest rocks and straightforward surveys. But he would carry with him the memory of that glowing stone, reminder that even the earth itself could be made to lie when human greed demanded it. The snow continued falling, covering the paths to the grotto, the hill with its hidden reservoir, the grounds where soon a new spa would rise. By spring the Count would be dead, Leopold would be master, and the Heartstone would return to its natural darkness. But tonight, Wilhelm knew, it still glowed with its false light, testament to the dangerous chemistry between knowledge and ambition. The 15th of December arrived bitter cold, with the kind of frost that turned breath to clouds and made the estate's windows bloom with ice flowers. Wilhelm had spent the week following the Count's instructions to the letter, completing the official survey, filing duplicates with notaries in both Karlovy Vary and Prague, establishing ironclad documentation that would protect the mineral rights from any future creditors. Leopold watched these proceedings with barely concealed agitation, but could find no legal grounds to interfere. That night, restless and unable to concentrate on his correspondence to Martha, Wilhelm decided to check his equipment near the mill pond one final time. The moon was nearly full, casting sharp shadows across the snow-covered landscape. As he approached the pond, he noticed fresh tracks leading up the hill toward the grotto's hidden reservoir. The boots were unmistakable. Leopold was making another midnight addition to his chemical mixture. Wilhelm should have turned back, should have remembered he was a hired surveyor, not a detective, with a family depending on his safe return. But something, call it professional pride or simple human indignation at such calculated cruelty, drove him to follow those tracks up the treacherous hillside. He moved carefully, his bad leg protesting against the climb, using trees for support on the icy slope. As he neared the reservoir, he heard sounds, the clink of glass, muttered curses in educated German, the splash of liquid being poured. Wilhelm crept closer, using a large oak for cover, until he could see Leopold crouched beside the pool, emptying bottles into the water by lamplight. The air was so focused on his task that he didn't notice Wilhelm's approach until a branch cracked under the surveyor's weight. Leopold spun around, nearly dropping his lamp, his face a mask of shock that quickly transformed into something more dangerous. "Herr Brenner, taking a midnight stroll?" Wilhelm stepped into the lamplight, abandoning pretense. "I could ask you the same, Your Excellency." Leopold set down the empty bottle carefully, his movements deliberate. "I often walk at night. It helps me think about the future. My future." He stood slowly, and Wilhelm noticed he wore a hunting knife at his belt. "You should have taken my offer and left when you could." "Your father asked me to complete the survey. I keep my contracts." "My father?" Leopold's laugh was bitter, still trying to control everything from his deathbed. "Do you know what it's like, Brenner, to wait your entire life for your turn, only to watch the old man give away pieces of your inheritance to spite you? The mineral springs were never yours. They were discovered during your father's lifetime, under his authority. Everything here is mine."
The sudden vehemence made Leopold's lamp flicker. Or will be, once that stubborn old fool finally dies. The stone knows. The stone has always known when the master's time comes. Wilhelm gestured toward the pool with its chemical residue. The stone knows what you tell it to know. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the winter wind through bare branches. When Leopold spoke again, his voice was calmer, more calculating. "What do you want, Brenner? Money? I can arrange that, even with my current difficulties. A position elsewhere? I have connections throughout the empire." "Name your price." "I want to finish my work and leave with my reputation intact." "Your reputation?" Leopold took a step closer, his hand moving casually toward the knife. "A man's reputation is fragile, especially a working man's. Accidents happen. Mine collapses, equipment fails, men disappear in the mountains. Your sister would receive your effects, of course, and a generous compensation for the tragic loss." The threat was explicit now. Wilhelm felt his heart racing but kept his voice steady. "Dr. Hartman knows I'm out here. If something happens to me..." "Hartman is an old woman who sees conspiracies everywhere. Besides, he's fond of his position here, his comfortable life. He won't risk it for a dead geologist." Leopold took another step forward, and Wilhelm realized with cold certainty that the heir was desperate enough to actually consider murder. The gambling debts must be even worse than Hartman had suggested. But before either man could act, a voice called out from below. "Herr Brenner! Your Excellency! Come quickly!" It was Anna, her voice carrying clearly through the cold air. Both men froze. Then Leopold quickly kicked snow over the chemical bottles, while Wilhelm began descending toward her voice. They found her at the forest edge, wrapped in a shawl, her face grave. "It's the Count," she said, addressing Leopold while carefully not looking at the reservoir above. "Dr. Hartman says you must come immediately." Leopold pushed past them both, half running toward the house. Wilhelm started to follow, but Anna caught his arm. "I saw you go out," she whispered quickly. "When you didn't return, I worried. So I created a distraction. The Count is actually sleeping peacefully." Wilhelm looked at her with new respect. That was dangerous. Less dangerous than leaving you alone with him on a dark hillside. She glanced up toward the reservoir. "Did you find what you sought?" "I found more than I wanted to know." They walked back slowly, Anna's presence a shield against any immediate threat from Leopold. At the house, they found confusion. Leopold discovering the false alarm, Hartman puzzled by the miscommunication, the Countess emerging from the chapel, demanding to know what was happening. Wilhelm slipped away to his room, where he immediately wrote a detailed account of the night's events, sealed it, and addressed it to Jakob Stein with instructions to open it only if Wilhelm failed to contact him within 3 days. It was a small insurance policy, but better than nothing. At dawn, he was summoned to Leopold's study. The air looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept, but his manner was controlled. "I've reconsidered," Leopold said without preamble. "Your work here is exemplary. Complete your survey properly. Take until year's end as originally contracted. Your full payment will be ready when you leave." It was a retreat, or perhaps a truce. Wilhelm nodded, understanding the subtext. "Stay out of my way, and I'll let you leave alive." "However," Leopold continued, "I must insist on complete discretion about all aspects of your work here. The mineral springs, the estate's geological features, any phenomena you may have observed. A gentleman's agreement." "Of course." They looked at each other across the desk, two men who knew too much about each other, bound now by mutual threat. Leopold needed Wilhelm's silence.
Wilhelm needed Leopold's forbearance. It was an ugly bargain, but perhaps the only one possible. As Wilhelm left the study, he encountered Dr. Hartmann in the hallway. The physician pulled him aside. "The Count is asking for you again. He knows his time is very short now. Perhaps days, not weeks." Hartmann paused, choosing his words carefully. He also knows about last night. Anna may have been discreet, but servants talk. He wants to thank you for your dedication to accuracy in all things. Wilhelm climbed the stairs to the Count's chamber, thinking about fathers and sons, about inheritance and legacy, about the prices men paid for their ambitions. The stone in the grotto would continue glowing until Leopold achieved his goal, or Wilhelm found a way to stop it without endangering himself. It was a delicate balance, like walking on ice. One wrong step could shatter everything. But sometimes, Wilhelm reflected, the most dangerous confrontations were the ones that ended not with violence, but with understanding. He and Leopold had shown their cards to each other. Now the game would play out to its inevitable conclusion, each man maneuvering within the constraints of what they knew and what they couldn't afford to reveal. The 20th of December brought an unexpected thaw, turning the estate's snow-covered paths into rivers of mud and making the very air feel heavy with moisture. Wilhelm had spent the previous days in careful preparation, appearing to complete his survey while actually implementing a plan that had come to him during those long sleepless nights following his confrontation with Leopold. The solution, when it finally presented itself, was elegantly simple, the kind of answer that made him laugh at his own earlier blindness. He couldn't expose Leopold without endangering himself, couldn't stop the chemical additions without arousing suspicion, but he could redirect nature itself. Working alone in the pre-dawn hours, Wilhelm had carefully altered the drainage around the hidden reservoir. Using nothing more than a shovel and his knowledge of water flow, he created a new channel that would divert the chemically contaminated water away from the grotto and into a natural sinkhole 50 yards distant. The beauty of it was its subtlety. The change appeared entirely natural, as if the recent thaw had simply overwhelmed the reservoir's capacity and carved a new path. On the morning of December 21st, Wilhelm was taking his breakfast in the kitchen when Anna burst in, eyes wide with amazement. "The stone," she breathed. "It stopped glowing." Cook saw it first when she went to fetch water for morning tea. Dark as ordinary rock. The household erupted into confused speculation. Father Benedict proclaimed it a Christmas miracle. The Countess fell to her knees in grateful prayer, and the servants whispered that perhaps the curse had lifted. Dr. Hartmann maintained professional skepticism, but couldn't hide his relief. Only Leopold seemed agitated, excusing himself repeatedly throughout the day, presumably to check his reservoir and discover what had gone wrong.
Wilhelm maintained an expression of mild scientific interest, making notes in his journal as if documenting an interesting but ultimately inexplicable phenomenon. When questioned, he offered vague theories about temperature changes and barometric pressure, careful to sound uncertain rather than definitive. That afternoon, the Count summoned him for what would prove to be their final meeting. The old man lay propped against his pillows, his breathing labored, but his eyes bright with what might have been amusement. "The stone has stopped its performance," the Count wheezed. "Most curious timing, wouldn't you say? Natural phenomena are often unpredictable, Your Excellency." The Count's dry chuckle turned into a cough. When he recovered, he gestured toward a leather portfolio on the bedside table. "Your final payment, plus the bonus we discussed. There's also a letter of recommendation. You'll find it quite comprehensive." Wilhelm took the portfolio, feeling its substantial weight. "You're very generous." "I pay for value received, Herr Brenner, and you've provided considerable value. Not all of it geological." The Count's eyes sharpened. "My son is brilliant but impatient. He never learned that some things can't be rushed, that forcing nature, or human nature, often produces unexpected consequences." "The mineral springs will provide excellent income for the estate." "Yes, income that's already legally protected and allocated. My wife will be comfortable. My son will inherit his title and lands, but will have to manage them wisely to prosper. Perhaps necessity will teach him what privilege couldn't." They sat in silence for a moment, two men who understood each other perfectly without needing to speak plainly. Finally, the Count raised a trembling hand in dismissal. "Go home to your family, Herr Brenner. You've earned your rest." That evening, Leopold called him to the study one last time. The heir looked exhausted, defeated in some fundamental way. "The stone has stopped glowing," Leopold said without preamble. "Father seems to be rallying. The household takes it as a sign of divine intervention." "Perhaps it is." Leopold's laugh was bitter. "Don't play games with me, Brenner. We both know better." He paused, pouring himself brandy with hands that shook slightly. The reservoir was compromised. The thaw, apparently. An act of nature. Nature can be unpredictable. Indeed. Leopold drained his glass. "You'll leave tomorrow?" "My work is complete." "Yes, it certainly is." Leopold reached into his desk, pulling out a sealed envelope. "Your travel documents and a draft on my Vienna bank. Don't mistake this for gratitude. I simply want you gone." Wilhelm took the envelope, noting its weight suggested Leopold had been more generous than required. Guilt money, perhaps, or insurance for silence. As he turned to leave, Leopold spoke again. "That night on the hillside, would you really have exposed me?" Wilhelm considered the question. "Would you really have killed me?" "I don't know." Leopold's honesty was unexpected. "I've become someone I don't recognize, Brenner. The debts, the pressure, watching father linger while everything crumbles. I convinced myself the stone was simply hastening the inevitable." "The inevitable rarely needs our assistance." A lesson learned too late. Leopold turned to stare out the window at the dark grotto. "The stone will never glow again, will it?" "Not by artificial means. Though who knows? Nature has her own mysteries. Perhaps one day, under the right conditions." He left Leopold contemplating that possibility, a man trapped between the failure of his scheme and the possibility that the family curse might yet be real. That night, Wilhelm packed carefully, wrapping his rock samples and notes in oilcloth, securing the considerable sum he'd accumulated. He'd send most to Martha immediately, ensuring Franz's education and his sister's security. The rest would establish him in a new position, perhaps in the Bohemian mountains, where good geological surveys were increasingly in demand. Anna came to say goodbye, bringing a final cup of coffee and news from the servants' hall. "They're saying the master will recover," she said, "that the stone's darkness means he's been reprieved." "And what do you think?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think the stone told the truth, in its way. Something did die here. the young master's scheme, perhaps his last innocence, and something might yet be reborn. You're quite the philosopher, Anna. Service teaches you to see beneath surfaces, Herr Brenner, just as your rocks do. She paused at the door. That money you gave me, I won't be needing it after all. The Countess has promoted me to head housemaid with a proper salary. Keep it anyway, for your future, she smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. Then I'll think of it as payment for lessons learned. You taught me that understanding how something works doesn't diminish its wonder. The stone may have glowed through trickery, but the real miracle was how people responded, with fear, with faith, with determination to find truth. After she left, Wilhelm stood at his window one last time, looking out at the estate grounds silvered by moonlight. Tomorrow he would leave this place of Baroque facades and hidden reservoirs, of noble ambitions and base deceptions. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd completed his survey, earned his payment, protected himself and others, and perhaps even taught a spoiled heir something about consequences. The Heartstone sat in its grotto, dark and ordinary, keeping its own counsel about the affairs of the men who attributed such power to it. And that, Wilhelm thought, was exactly as it should be.
The 8th of January 1874 dawned clear and bitterly cold, with a kind of crystalline air that made the Bohemian mountains appear close enough to touch. Wilhelm stood in the Count's study, not Leopold's study, for the old man had surprised everyone by not only surviving, but recovering enough strength to conduct business from his wheeled chair. The transformation in the household over the past 2 weeks had been remarkable, as if the stone's return to darkness had lifted more than just superstitious dread. You delayed your departure, the Count observed, his voice stronger than it had been in months. He sat wrapped in furs despite the blazing fire, but his eyes were sharp as ever. The weather was unsuitable for travel, Wilhelm replied, though both men knew this was only partially true. He'd stayed to ensure his intervention with the reservoir remained undetected, to see the situation fully resolved. Indeed. And now Leopold has departed for Vienna. Urgent business, he claimed. The Count's tone suggested he knew exactly what kind of business. Creditors who wouldn't wait any longer. He left management of the estate to my steward, most unexpected. Wilhelm had heard the servants' gossip. Leopold's gambling debts had finally caught up with him, and without the inheritance he'd counted on coming immediately, he'd been forced to negotiate with his creditors directly. The Count had provided just enough funds to prevent complete scandal, but not enough to enable continued profligacy. Your mineral springs are already attracting interest, Wilhelm said, changing the subject. I've had 3 inquiries from development companies this week alone. Yes, your thorough documentation has proved most valuable. My wife will have independent income for life, regardless of how Leopold manages the estate. The Count gestured toward a chair. Sit, Herr Brenner. There are things that should be said before you leave. Wilhelm sat, noting how the winter light caught the old man's profile, making him look like one of his ancestral portraits. I knew about the chemicals, the Count said quietly. Not at first, but soon enough. Leopold was never as subtle as he believed. The purchases from Vienna, the midnight expeditions, the convenient timing of the stone's illumination. Yet you said nothing. What father wants to acknowledge such a thing? Besides, I was curious to see how far he would go, who would stand against him. The Count's gaze was steady. You interested me, Brenner.
A working man who wouldn't be bought, wouldn't be frightened, yet had the wisdom not to confront directly. Self-preservation, Your Excellency. Wisdom, the Count insisted. You found a solution that preserved everyone's dignity while stopping the harm. The reservoir's natural failure, the stone's return to darkness, even Leopold can't prove it wasn't coincidence. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, two men who had played a complex game and both emerged, if not victorious, at least intact. "I have something for you," the Count said, producing a small wooden box from his desk. Inside, cushioned in velvet, lay a piece of fluorite from the heart stone, not chipped away, but naturally fractured, showing the mineral's perfect cubic cleavage. "A memento, for your nephew, perhaps. Every geologist should have exceptional specimens in his collection." Wilhelm accepted the gift, understanding its layered significance. He'll treasure it. Tell him it glows under the right conditions. Natural conditions. The Count smiled slightly. Let him discover for himself what those might be. That afternoon, Wilhelm paid his final visit to Jacob Stein's laboratory. The chemist greeted him warmly, clearing a space among his cluttered equipment. "So, the mysterious geological anomaly has resolved itself," Jacob said, his tone suggesting he suspected more than natural causes. "Nature takes its course," Wilhelm replied diplomatically. Jacob laughed. "Indeed, though I hear young von Reichenbach has suddenly discovered urgent business elsewhere. Most convenient." He pulled out a bottle of good Moravian Slivovitz, pouring 2 glasses. "To nature's courses, then, and to men wise enough not to impede them." They drank, and Jacob grew more serious. "You did well, my friend. In my community, we have a saying, 'The righteous man falls 7 times and rises 8. Sometimes the falling is less important than the method of rising." "I'm no righteous man. I'm a geologist who wanted to complete his survey and go home safely." "Perhaps. But I heard about the maid who kept her position, the Count who kept his dignity, even the heir who was allowed to retreat rather than be destroyed. These aren't the actions of a man thinking only of rocks and minerals." Wilhelm thought of Anna, promoted now and secure, of the Count facing death with clear eyes, even of Leopold, perhaps learning in Vienna what his father's protection had previously shielded him from. "We all do what we must," he said finally. "Yes, but some do it with more grace than others." As evening approached, Wilhelm made his final rounds of farewell. Dr. Hartmann shook his hand warmly, promising to write if interesting geological cases arose. Father Benedict blessed his journey, still convinced divine intervention had saved the Count. The Countess, formal as ever, nonetheless pressed a small purse into his hands for the journey, containing far more than any journey would require. Anna waited by the carriage that would take him to the station. She wore her new head housemaid's uniform with quiet pride. "The stone remains dark," she said. "The servants check daily, but it's just ordinary rock now. As it should be. Will you tell your family about all this? About the glowing stone and its mysteries?" Wilhelm considered. "I'll tell them I surveyed an estate, found excellent mineral springs, and met people who taught me that truth comes in many forms. The rest? Perhaps when my nephew is older, when he can understand that science without conscience is mere cleverness, but science with wisdom can preserve more than it reveals." She smiled. Safe travels, Herr Brenner. May all your stones be honest ones. As the carriage rolled away from the estate, Wilhelm looked back once at the Baroque facade, the grounds where he'd spent these intense months, the grove that concealed the now dark Heartstone.
He thought of the letter he would write to Martha tonight from his railway hotel, the substantial bank draft he would enclose, the news of Franz's secured education, the promise of regular support from his new position, already arranged through the Count's recommendations. But he also thought of stories he might tell Franz someday, when the boy was a man. About stones that glowed with impossible light, about the weight of family legends, about the dangerous chemistry between knowledge and ambition, about how sometimes the greatest discoveries weren't what you found in the earth, but what you learned about the people walking above it. The winter sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, and Wilhelm allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd come to survey for water and found himself surveying human nature instead. Both, he'd learned, followed certain laws, carved channels through the world, and could be redirected by those who understood their flow. Tomorrow, he would be on a train heading home, his samples and certificates packed carefully away, his pockets heavy with honestly earned gold. But tonight, as the lights of Karlovy Vary began to twinkle in the valley below, he was simply a man who had navigated treacherous waters and found his way to solid ground. The carriage rolled on through the gathering dusk, carrying him away from the von Reichenbach estate and its mysteries, toward the simpler certainties of home and family. Spring came late to Bohemia in 1874, but when it finally arrived in April, it transformed the mountains around Yakimov into a paradise of wildflowers and rushing streams. Wilhelm stood at the entrance of the St. Joachim mine, now his to supervise, watching his crews emerge from the morning shift. The silver deposits here were less glamorous than Karlovy Vary's healing waters, but they were honest work, pulled from the earth by men who knew the value of what they sought. His office occupied the upper floor of the mine's administrative building, with windows overlooking both the works and the valley beyond. On his desk sat 3 items that connected him to those strange months at the von Reichenbach estate. The piece of fluorite the Count had given him, now serving as a paperweight, a letter from Dr. Hartmann that had arrived that morning, and a geological survey report bearing his name, already becoming referenced by other professionals in the field. The letter brought news both expected and surprising. Count Franz von Reichenbach had died peacefully on March 21st, the spring equinox, surrounded by family and clergy. He'd been conscious until the end, Hartmann wrote, discussing improvements to the estate and the development of the mineral springs with remarkable clarity. The Heartstone had remained dark throughout his illness and death, becoming just another curiosity for tourists who were already beginning to visit the newly established spa.
Leopold had returned from Vienna for the funeral, somehow having resolved his most pressing debts. He'd inherited the title and estate as expected, but the profitable mineral springs remained in trust for his mother. Most surprisingly, he'd apparently taken to the actual management of the lands with unexpected seriousness, as if his father's death had finally granted him not just inheritance, but purpose. He even kept your drainage improvements around the grotto, Hartmann wrote, with what Wilhelm imagined was dry amusement. Claims they prevent flooding during spring thaws. Most practical. Anna had written as well, her careful script showing the education she was now pursuing in her evening hours. The Countess, secure in her income from the spa, had established a small school for the estate servants' children, and Anna talked there 3 afternoons a week while maintaining her housekeeping duties.
She reported that the Heartstone had become quite the attraction, with visitors paying a small fee to see the legendary crystal that had supposedly predicted the deaths of counts for centuries. No one mentions that it failed to glow for the last count, she noted. Leopold has had a brass plaque installed, telling the legend in 3 languages. He charges extra for evening viewings by lamplight, which makes the crystal sparkle beautifully. You might appreciate the irony, Herr Brenner. The stone now glows on command for paying tourists, which seems somehow more honest than its previous performance. Wilhelm smiled at that, thinking of Leopold turning his failed deception into legitimate commerce. There was something peculiarly Austrian about it, this transformation of dark mystery into tourist attraction, of family curse into family income. A knock at his door interrupted his musings. His assistant entered, followed by a young man of perhaps 18, thin and eager-looking in a carefully mended suit. Herr Brenner, this is Franz Müller. He's applied for the apprentice surveyor position. Wilhelm looked at the young man more carefully, noting the familiar, determined set of the jaw, the hands already bearing small scars from manual labor, the mixture of hope and anxiety in his eyes. His nephew had grown considerably since Wilhelm had last seen him. "Uncle," Franz said, then caught himself. Herr Brenner, I've completed my basic certification, as you can see from my documents." Wilhelm maintained his professional demeanor while reviewing the papers, though his heart swelled with pride. Franz had not only completed his education, but excelled, earning recommendations from all his instructors. "Your qualifications appear adequate," Wilhelm said formally. "The position requires long hours underground, precise measurements in difficult conditions, and absolute dedication to accuracy. Can you manage that?" "Yes, sir. You taught me that stones don't lie, but they don't reveal their truths easily either. I'm prepared to learn." After dismissing his assistant and officially hiring Franz, uncle and nephew finally embraced. "Mother sends her love," Franz said, "and her gratitude. The roof no longer leaks. My sisters are in school, and she's taken in sewing work now that she doesn't worry constantly about money." "Your mother saved me as much as I saved her," Wilhelm replied, thinking of how Martha's letters had kept him grounded during those strange months at the estate. Family is its own form of mineral wealth. Pressure and time either crush it or transform it into something precious. That evening, Wilhelm took Franz to his modest quarters above the town's main street. Over dinner, he finally told the full story of the von Reichenbach estate, the glowing stone, Leopold's deception, and its resolution. Franz listened with fascination, occasionally interrupting with technical questions about phosphorescence and mineral properties. "But why didn't you expose him immediately?" Franz asked when the tale was complete. Wilhelm poured them both beer, considering his answer. "Because, my boy, righteousness without power is merely noise. I was a hired surveyor. He was nobility. Who would have believed me? And even if they had, what good would have come from destroying him publicly? His father knew the truth and chose his own response. The servants kept their positions. The Countess gained security. Even Leopold, perhaps, learned something valuable. But he tried to hasten his father's death. He tried to hasten an inheritance he believed was rightfully his. The phosphorescent stone didn't kill the Count. His diseased lungs did that. Leopold's crime was manipulating fear and superstition, turning people's beliefs against them. But in the end, those same people found their faith again when the stone went dark. Sometimes, Franz, the best justice isn't punishment, but prevention. Franz studied the piece of fluorite Wilhelm had given him, turning it to catch the lamplight. It really glows under certain conditions? Under ultraviolet light, yes. Also when heated or exposed to specific chemicals. The Count was right. It's all about the right conditions. Natural conditions. Wilhelm smiled. Just as we all show our true nature under the right conditions. Leopold revealed his desperation, the Count his cunning, Anna her courage, and perhaps I revealed my own tendency to meddle while pretending not to. And the stone revealed that it was just a stone. No, Wilhelm corrected gently. The stone revealed that humans will always find meaning in nature, will always create stories to explain what they don't understand. That's not weakness, Franz. That's what makes us human. The error isn't in believing in wonders, but in manufacturing false ones. They sat quietly for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the mining town, workers heading home, children playing in the streets, the distant rumble of ore carts. It was a simpler world than Karlovy Vary's elegant facades, but more honest, perhaps. I kept thinking about that stone, Wilhelm said finally, about how many generations of von Reichenbachs lived and died believing in its power. The legend shaped their lives, gave weight to their mortality, meaning to their endings. Leopold's chemicals lasted a few months. The legend lasted centuries. Which had more power, do you think? Franz considered this, but the legend was false. Was it? The stone did glow when counts were dying. Just because Leopold triggered it artificially doesn't erase the other times, the ones we can't explain. Maybe there's something in the groundwater during certain seasons, or particular atmospheric conditions, or Wilhelm shrugged. The universe is vast, Franz. We've barely begun to understand its workings. Dismissing mystery entirely is as foolish as accepting every superstition. Later, as Franz prepared for bed in the small spare room, he asked one more question. Do you ever regret leaving? The estate, I mean. You could have stayed, managed the spa development. Wilhelm thought of Anna, perhaps teaching children their letters at this very moment. Of Leopold, wrestling with ledgers and agricultural reports. Of the Heartstone, dark in its grotto except when tourists paid for lamplight to make it sparkle. No, he said simply. That was their story, not mine. I was just a temporary narrator, you might say. Someone who helped write one chapter. This, he gestured toward the window where the mine works were visible in moonlight, this is my story. Honest rock, honest labor, honest rewards. But that night, lying in his narrow bed, Wilhelm dreamed of blue-green light pulsing in darkness, of water carrying secrets through limestone channels, of a heart-shaped stone that knew more than it could tell. He woke before dawn, as was his habit, and stood at his window watching the sun slowly illuminate the mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay the von Reichenbach estate, where spring would be bringing new growth to cover old secrets. The spa would be taking shape. Leopold would be learning the weight of responsibility, and the Heartstone would wait in its grotto, holding its silence about what was real and what was manufactured, what was legend and what was truth.
Wilhelm picked up the fluorite specimen from his desk, watching the morning light reveal its inner fire. Every stone had its secrets, he'd learned, but so did every human heart.
The trick wasn't in exposing all mysteries, but in knowing which ones to reveal, which to redirect, and which to leave in peace.